My best practice is just calling up sales reps that are disgruntled. Tell me why. What's painful about your life? What's going on operationally that you just hate doing? And I find a lot of the innovation just comes from listening to sales. I think sometimes RevOps leaders can be ivory towerish and just force stuff upon salespeople. Here's your comp plan and here's your territory, and you have to take it, and that's what it is.
Welcome to RevOps Rockstars, in pursuit of unicorns. I'm David Carnes.
And I'm Jarin Chu. Join us as we interview RevOps leaders to explore the challenges they have faced, the biggest lessons they've learned, and what they think makes a RevOps rockstar.
This show is brought to you by OpFocus, on a mission to help companies run their businesses better by letting you focus on growth while we scale your operations. Let's get this show on the road. Today's guest is someone we're really eager to talk with. He's a strategic sales and operations leader. He was recognized by Utah's 2020 Business Executive 40 Under 40. He helped Qualtrics go from a $1 billion unicorn to an $8 billion SAP acquisition. Chief Operating Officer, Go-to-Market Operations, Cody Guymon. Welcome, Cody, to the podcast.
David, Jarin, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Big fan of the podcast.
So Cody, let's get right to it. What's something in RevOps that you had to learn the hard way?
Territories. Anyone in RevOps knows sales territories are really, really a big pain. So I got thrust into it in my first experience in RevOps. That's what I was. I was a territory manager, creating sales territories across the globe. And it's a difficult thing for sure. There's no exact science. There's no playbook to go, read up on how to go do this. So I just relied a lot on sales leaders to help guide me through that, what they've seen work, what are the best reps doing, and grab some tidbits there. And thankfully had a statistician on the team that decided to be able to do some predictive analytics on accounts and some predictive scoring model type stuff. And we kind of lucked out into getting territories right early on at Qualtrics, but it's a beast. Those are really hard. They take months at times. And we were able to thankfully take a 3-month process and automate it down to, 6 minutes at the annual turn now. So there's a fun deal, but very, very difficult.
And when you're doing that, you're going through the territory alignment, realignment process. What are the key goals of that? Are you trying to achieve fairness, or what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, lots of goals here. So fairness and equity is one of them. You need to make sure that each rep at their given tier has the same chance to go hit their quota as their peer next to them. You don't want, one rep that has 80 accounts and they're all customers, that's an AE5 sitting next to another AE5 that has one customer and 42 accounts. Right? It's not going to be fair. So there's a balancing act. There's fairness that needs to happen. But ultimately, the goal of territories is for every rep to be successful and hit their quota and have the chance to do so. And then at the company level, it works out at the company level because we'll go crush our goals with that. But there's that's definitely one of them: fairness, equity, and then giving a chance for success for everybody.
I've never heard, Cody, of a statistician being part of the territory planning process. I suspect that's unique to Qualtrics, just given the nature of the business and what Qualtrics did. Tell me a little bit more about what kind of analyses they ran in analyzing the accounts and analyzing the patches to ensure fairness.
Yeah. So thankfully we have a statistician at Workato where I'm at now as well. And we're implementing the same practice here. But what you're doing is you're doing a predictive spend model on your account. So you're looking at your historic data and you're looking at, what accounts are spending and what industries. And you can basically load up a lot of variables into any stats-based product. So R or Python. And you can do a predictive spend outcome, and you can kind of balance that and segment your customers and prospects based on that output. And then you can start to create, fairness across the globe in that route. So, for those that are, stats nerds out there like myself, the package is called Random Forest in R. I got that early tidbit from someone at a conference in the early days in RevOps, and they told me that practice. It's basically like a tree-based stats package that you can use to get that outcome.
Wow. This makes me want to know a little bit more about, you mentioned Workato has a statistician as well, a little bit more about the team and of course, then your role. Paint me a picture first, because Workato is a really well-known brand now, works across many industries, provides all sorts of automation, integration, orchestration services. I think you're coming up close to 1,000 employees, and you got your Series E most recently in 2021. How big is the size of the operations RevOps specifically team that you're working with? And what kind of functions does that headcount kind of spread out into?
Yeah, team here is about 22. So a small, lean team, and it spans multiple functions. So it's all of your traditional sales ops, as well as marketing ops, partner ops, and CS ops. So it's really bringing all of the ops orgs together that interact with the revenue side of the business and making sure we break down silos, coordinate together, and that sort of thing. The statistician that I'm referring to, the title is actually data scientist. So a lot of people will hire data scientists on their analytics teams. And actually at Workato, he runs our go-to-market analytics and insights team. But most data scientists, or what I've found from data scientists, are trained in statistics or have some basic understandings. And then that helps them be able to code and put together those models.
You mentioned having sales ops, marketing ops, partner ops, and CS ops. And it's really exciting every time I hear CS ops, because I feel like that's kind of the forgotten child of RevOps for many companies. I think a lot of them have a legacy, maybe starting out in sales ops, occasionally having the marketing ops function, and then less so partner and CS ops. Tell me a little bit more about how you're measuring each of those functions and the success within them.
Yeah. So for myself, I tie myself to the company number. I think if the company, is successful, then overall I'm doing my job. But at each of the functional units, they're going to be tied to the functions that they support. So even within sales ops, we have people that will support, specifically just EMEA. Our field ops director of EMEA would be tied to the EMEA number. And, the CS ops would be tied to the overall macro goals of CS, whether it's around renewal rate or in some cases expansion or consumption. So what we really try to do is get the alignment in RevOps with the organization that each functional leader supports, and make sure that those metrics and things that we're tracking at the company level, they don't compete with one another, right? So one of the groups in my organization is go-to-market comp plans. And so go-to-market compensation, right? And so you're putting together comp plans for CS and sales and SDRs and the partner team and everybody, right? Pre-sales, post-sales, so that you can really make sure that we're going to work in harmony together in that customer journey, and that the drivers of what people are getting paid in their variable pay, they don't compete. That there's we have the clean metrics across the board. And so therefore, that's what we're really tying that compensation or measurement to, is how each of those units are doing.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And it sounds like in this case, Forrester had put out kind of 3 different models of how most companies think about RevOps. There's the alliance of the willing, there's the centrally organized, and then there's the kind of not exactly existing sort of model. And in your case, it is centrally organized, but you're also very clear about ensuring that each of those sub-teams have incentives and have targets that are directly related to the internal stakeholders that they support.
Absolutely. Yeah. So each of the groups, they'll hardline to me operationally, because there's a lot of benefit there, but they dotted line into the functional leaders they support. So the CS, head of CS ops, dotted lines to the head of CS, and they work in tandem and pair to drive outcomes. And then hard lines to me, to where we can bring in, some of the operational rigor and standardization across the company that will scale efficiently.
Cody, your title is Chief Operating Officer, GTM Operations. That's quite a unique title. We usually speak to folks who explicitly might have RevOps in their name, and we are starting to see more GTM Ops as a title in the folks that we're reaching out to. Can you help paint me a picture? What does your day-to-day actually entail?
Yeah. So right now, it's February. This is the annual turn. Our fiscal ends January 31st. So right now, this is everything from territories getting out globally to comp plans, like I just talked about, getting administered, quotas being set, targets being set at the company level, a whole host of all that stuff. SKOs happening, who's going to cloud. We got to pick the winners. There's data and analysis that goes into all of that. We have a value selling methodology boot camp that's coming up, and I'm actually leaving tomorrow to go to Spain to be able to go do that for the Europe team. But there's so much going on, which is what I love, and it changes every day. I think that RevOps has seasons. The annual turn season, 2 months, 3 months before the annual turn and 2 to 3 months after is intense operational execution. And then I think you get into the next 6 months, which is really innovative. That's the time that I love. I love to execute. It's great to be there for the org to make sure we're getting all of this stuff dialed in. But, I really, really enjoy the innovation, right? The data science predictive modeling happens in the innovation time period. The Workato automations in RevOps that makes life easier for sales reps. That type of stuff happens in the innovation season. And so the day-to-day changes a ton, and that's what I love about the job.
Wow. I often have that question for RevOps leaders, which is how do you balance that strategy versus execution, right? Because so much of what RevOps is successful is because we're so good at executing. But the truly forward-looking RevOps organizations are able to really take the time away from just the running of, right? The running in, and they're able to kind of take that 50,000 foot view and analyze trends, recognize potentially signals that the rest of the business doesn't get to do. You mentioned the seasonality of RevOps. I'm wondering, when you get into that time for strategic thinking and planning, are there any kinds of practices, rituals, things that you personally employ to help make sure that you have that mind space to do that big picture thinking?
Yeah, I think that you've first off got to start giving yourself time to do it. So I will literally block an hour of time, 2 hours of time to think about it during the day. And just kind of step back, right? You have to see the forest from the trees, like you're talking about. You have to be able to get back and see that big picture view. And my best practice is just calling up sales reps that are disgruntled. Tell me why. What's painful about your life? What's going on operationally that you just hate doing? And I find a lot of the innovation just comes from listening to sales. I think sometimes RevOps leaders can be ivory towerish and just force stuff upon salespeople. Here's your comp plan and here's your territory, and you have to take it, and that's what it is. I'm the exact opposite. If there's a spectrum of that, I am in the trenches with salespeople, talking to them about everything. And so for me, I find a lot of innovation comes from just listening and then using the operational expertise that we have or the tools that we have at our disposal to then go make whatever the suggestion is from the sales leader or sales rep. We go innovate to make it actually happen, and sometimes make it happen faster. So anyways, those are some of my best practices.
Really, really good advice to listen and to be in there with the end users, take their feedback, especially when they're unhappy, and that's uncomfortable sometimes, right?
Yeah.
With this many kinds of roles and functions and tasks that you have in the department, I suspect you have a good opinion and approach on what kinds of things you try to keep in-house in terms of go-to-market operations and RevOps, what kinds of things you might want to actually consider external help, especially when the team is growing. How do you kind of balance in-house versus outsourced work?
Yeah, I think outcomes and speed are the ones that I prioritize, right? So if it's something that's going to have high impact and we need it quickly and it's going to take a while to build, we'll go buy it. I mean, it's time to value, right? It's time to market. So for us in operations, if there's a product that exists in the space that we need and we can go buy it quickly at an affordable price, and saves us time, then that's super important. I think you see that mostly across SaaS where there's super hyper growth. A lot of times you're not growing 5 to 10% and you have all this time on your hands to go figure out, how to build stuff and get, more cost effective. You're going to probably buy some things quicker if the value's there. And so for me, that's usually what I'll do. If I want to build something, it could be something that's longer term. Some of the most, I use an urgent and important matrix with a lot of projects that I put. And if it's urgent and important, we probably are going to buy if there's something there. If it's not as urgent and super important, we'll probably build. Like if we have time and we can put that in the seasons where we're innovating and we want to go build, we'll go do it. So I think for me, I'm balancing kind of urgent and important.
Right. Little known trivia is that OpFocus actually had an app on Salesforce's App Exchange that allowed you to basically graph out all your activities or tasks as urgent versus important. And it was early days of Visualforce. We thought it was pretty cool. MJ and I on our team, who's our SVP of technology, I wrote it out on a napkin and said, I think this would be helpful to people. So,
very helpful. I think that's, I preach that all the time. That's with
great.
My team to prioritize. That's where we go after urgent, important.
So you were talking about outcomes earlier. When thinking about big outcomes, corporate level, cross-functional initiatives, can you share with us what types of initiatives within Workato that you and your team own that are that big across the entire organization?
Yeah, I think, the annual plan that's going to the board, the numbers across the board, how are we going to get there with NRR? The metrics that matter now, right? I think your rule of 40 really matters now and how you're going to get there and the right balanced approach that you're going to take. Your NRR goals that matter. A lot of private companies are starting to key into what matters on the public market as the dynamics have shifted in the last 12 months. And so, from the RevOps perspective, coming in and being able to provide guidance and a path to get there and numbers behind it, massive company-wide initiative for RevOps for sure.
And I'm curious, so you're newer to the organization. Congratulations. That's pretty exciting. I'm trying to think how many board cycles you might have had an opportunity to do this next question that I have for you. Do you interface with the board or the investors?
I do. Workato? Yeah. I've got my first one in March, so I'm super excited about it. It'll be the first time that I've had it here at Workato. We definitely I'll be in the room. We prep the board deck. We're facilitating that collection of board slides and data and all of that stuff across the company and really crafting the narratives and all of that stuff when it comes to the board.
Oh, that's great. It's so interesting. Do you have a suggestion for how early or a preference for how early you and your team start working on that?
Yeah, we like to start prepping it as soon as the quarter ends. So as soon as the quarter ends, we have roughly 6 weeks. And so we can go backwards on a Gantt chart from there and, what we need right off the bat, the data as we do the close on the year, the quarter with finance, and we start loading things in at that point. And we'll really dial it in and have a polished V1 version of the deck, a week to 2 weeks before the board meeting so that we can meet on it and discuss the contents and where we might need to double click a little bit. And then we're going to grab some more data and fine tune that thing. But I personally, I'm early. I love to prep early. I don't like to wait to the last minute. It gives me too much stress and anxiety. So I'm as soon as the quarter ends, I'm jumping in.
So while we're on the topic of reporting, where do you go to get an at-a-glance view of how the business is, how things are going for the business?
Yeah. So forecasting tool, first and foremost for me, I think if you've got a good one, we're a boost up shop here at Workato. I used Clarity at Qualtrics, but a forecasting tool that gives you some insights and maybe even some predictions on where you're going to land for the quarter or future quarters, what your pipeline coverage is, what leaders are calling in their business, where we think there might be risk. There's so much insights that can come from a forecasting tool. And then we use Sigma for our reporting needs and BI needs. And so, we've got 10 foundational reports that we're kind of looking at there. And so I think between the two systems, maybe some Salesforce dashboards in there, we can kind of see the holistic business.
Oh, that's so great. All right. So I have a very important question for you. So early in my career, I worked for 3 software companies. In the olden days, we called it eating your own dog food. Nowadays, I think we might refer to it as drinking your own champagne. I'm really curious, what are some ways that you use Workato to solve RevOps needs internally?
Yeah, I'm learning a ton about this as I'm joining the company, right? I've been here 4 months, but I love what I'm seeing so far. So think about some pain points that are typical in RevOps. The ones that pop to mind are lead routing, lead scoring. Yeah, that Workato does that automatically in the background. You don't have to, worry and have people manually do that. You can put whatever scoring model you have and connect the systems together and do some lead routing and lead scoring. That's one example. Another one, Salesforce hygiene. I hate past due close dates on deals. You're coming in the quarter and it has a close date from a month ago. You can ping reps in Slack, through the integration and just say the day that it's past due. Hey, your date is past due. What's the new close date? You put something in Slack and it feeds back into Salesforce. And now you have a lot better hygiene because your forecast is only really going to be as good as your hygiene is. And so the easier we can make that for sales is the better. So think if that's one example on hygiene that you can do, past due close date, but there's a million others that RevOps leaders know that they'd love to clean up. It's about serving it simply and easily for sales reps so that they can quickly, on their phone at Slack, be able to handle that on the fly. And another one is like approvals with Deal Desk. It's super easy to integrate Slack and Salesforce through Workato and tee that up. So at the end of the quarter, rather than having to go check, all these emails and then open up Salesforce and then go find the approval. But you got to do it on the desktop version because it's way easier to do that than on the email. You can literally just get Slack and it'll pull up all the deal, the things about the deal that matter. What are the payment terms? What's the deal size? Any special exception that's making it up to myself, COO or CRO, and you just literally press approve or throw a comment back on why you wouldn't approve it. And so those are a couple examples that I give on how, Workato is drinking its own Kool-Aid. But I think what's exciting is that the possibilities are endless. It's really any manual task as an operator that you don't love or that salespeople don't really love doing. It's about integrating the apps and automating them. And Workato is world-class at that.
Yeah, it seems like with Workato, you have an opportunity to really tighten up each step of the RevOps, the flow of information through RevOps. And we see it in so many interesting ways, whether it's enrichment or like you're talking about with Slack, so many interesting ways to do call outs and improve the information as it's flowing through the operations.
Absolutely. And for me, as an operations leader, I remember early day in my career where so much of what I was doing was just copying and pasting things from a spreadsheet to slides and reformatting it and manual tasks, right? And that doesn't give me a ton of joy. I love the strategic. I love the thought about what the numbers are actually saying, not putting them in slides. You can automate a Google slide template to feed from live data and like QBR decks. We all do QBRs, right? You can press a button and the QBR deck's done because it's feeding in all of the automated data into a template and it's all automated on Workato. And so for me, just in general, the possibilities are endless. And where I start with is like, what do I not enjoy about my job that's manual? And where can I free up time for my whole organization to be innovating? Because that's really, as you both know, as you've interviewed tons of RevOps leaders, that's what separates really good operations teams from ones that just execute. It's really the innovation. What are you doing differently than other people? How did you get ahead so much quicker? And if we can automate or use statistics or scoring models or whatever, that's really what separates, I think, really world-class operations teams from the pack.
And what you're saying gets me really excited because the idea that, hey, the technology now is becoming mature enough to not only help our end users, the folks on the front line, right? Sales users, marketing users, customer success users, but the people who are supporting them behind the scenes, like RevOps, are now also getting our suite of updates with the plus of automation, with the plus of being able to take a lot of those manual processes away from our day-to-day so that we can actually focus on the forest, like you said. If we look at RevOps more broadly and things that you are looking forward to, what do you think will be the next big disruption or next big blessing, however you might want to frame it, to RevOps that will transform folks' lives in RevOps?
Yeah, I think we're at a really interesting time in the RevOps space. I think I saw a report recently that, revenue operations is one of the highest occupations hired in the last year. It's climbing the charts. And so with that comes a lot of tech that's trying to becomes a RevOps platform, right? And we're seeing that across the globe. We're seeing so many companies becoming not just a forecasting tool, but trying to also be the outbound prospecting tool, the data enrichment tool, the BI tool, right? And you start to see a lot of people jumping into that. I mean, you see Clary, you see Gong, you see Outreach. They're starting to meld into similar companies where they're doing everything now. No one's like, you're not functionally just the best at forecasting. You're now trying to also be functionally best at outbound, right? And so I think what we're going to see is a lot of consolidation in the space and a winner emerge. And I'm excited to see who the winner is. I think it's going to be fun and exciting to see who emerges from the pack. But right now, I would say we're in a spot where each company still has their domain expertise. It's where they started. It's the bread and butter. It's what they started. And whoever can get the parity on the other ones quickest, probably going to pull ahead. And so I think what we'll see in the industry is some consolidation, probably a one tool that can do everything for RevOps leaders that will emerge. And that's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, and we saw that similar kind of evolution in the last, I would say, prior 10 years when it came to MarTech solutions, right? Different tools that traditionally did forms all day long or email all day long ended up, of course, adopting, what we now consider to be bread and butter marketing operations or marketing automation functionality. So that horizontal integration, I think, is inevitable. When you think about, Cody, your job and the things that you still have to do more manually or be more involved in, is there something that you wish there was a tool out there or a vendor out there who could also take that piece of your job off your plate so that you can actually do more of that strategic thinking?
I would love it if somebody could design a tech around deal disputes and rules of engagement. That would be ideal. That's part of the job that I don't love, right? You get a big global deal and it's a lead in one country and move to another one, but they, whatever it is, right? Everybody's got a rules of engagement, something that they're following on deal splits. And oftentimes I've got to be, the judge and the jury on those and decide what the split's going to be or who gets credit. And, you stay at a company long enough, you really start to upset a lot of people. So for me, I try and balance that out, try and be as fair and practical as I can, trying to default to the rules, kind of like law, case law would be. But for me, if there was a tool that could just handle all of that and I never had to deal with that part of my job, that'd be fantastic.
I love it. So probably one of our listeners out there is an aspiring entrepreneur and can lean in and go solve that. Take some funding and become the next unicorn.
Yes, I love it.
So Cody, we'd like to shift and talk a bit about you. So you are raising your family in Eagle Mountain, Utah. That sounds like an incredibly beautiful place.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I grew up in the East Bay in Livermore, California, but I've been in Utah 18, 19 years now. So it's a fantastic state. I love it. I've got a wife and 3 kids. We live in Eagle Mountain. It's, 30 minutes from everything, but it's also 30 minutes away from everything too, which I love. So it's a rural place out here in Utah, but it's growing pretty big and we enjoy it. It's beautiful, mountains, snow, all that good stuff.
Oh, that's so great. You did an undergraduate in finance at the University of Utah. You did an MBA at the University of Utah. Your prior position, you were COO of global sales at Qualtrics. So I'm curious, take us back. How did you get into SaaS RevOps in the first place?
I think most RevOps people would say they stumbled into it. I definitely didn't graduate from my finance undergrad and say that I want to go into RevOps. And I don't even know if that was an actual title at the time. So I don't think it was. But anyways, I'll let you know the journey. I started off doing some consulting. That's where I started out. The first kind of real job was doing consulting and really developed a good skill set, I would say, in just Excel and PowerPoint and presenting and things of that nature that consulting does well. But I didn't love the consulting business where I'd pass over the slide deck and hope and pray somebody that could implement what I just spent months doing in that slide deck. I wanted to see it end to end. So I knew from there I wanted to get into something where I could operationally execute, not just do the strategy side. So that's where I jumped into tech and it kind of worked my way around. I think I naturally gravitated towards salespeople And so I really, like most of my friends were in sales, but I had kind of an affinity for analytics and insights and like figuring out how to help sales do better. I didn't love the risk of the high variable pay and commission structure. I grew up kind of on and off of food stamps and government assistance, and so I'm kind of risk averse when it comes to money. I'd rather take a little bit less, give me a smooth paycheck that I can budget against, that's stable, and like that brings me comfort and happiness, right? So I wanted to be in sales a little bit and still have that desire, and I like to do customer facing things now in my role. But at the time, I was adverse to kind of going into 50% variable comp, and so I wanted to still help my friends go win. And so that's where I started to get into just sales ops at that time as an analyst, maybe a senior analyst, and work into an operations leader from there, just in sales ops. And then, getting into Qualtrics and being able to start kind of in territories and sales ops, go to market strategy piece there was fun. And then it kind of just one thing led to another. I don't know, when you're on a hyper growth company, and grateful for, what I had at Qualtrics, right? We got acquired, like you mentioned at the beginning, for $8 billion. Then we spun off and went public at $27 billion. And, it's just a wild ride. So if you're doing your job well and things come your way, my advice would be to just take it, say yes to everything that people ask you to go do. And I just started taking it and kind of working my way up there, and ultimately, was there for 6 years and led to my role over here. So I think I did not start out wanting to get into it, but I knew what I didn't like in my consulting days. I knew what I did like, kind of finding who I wanted to interact with and be close to the revenue side, but maybe leverage some operational skill set and analytics skill set.
So some really great advice there. And what I'm kind of excited about for you is I imagine the move over to Workato is potentially to just go do it all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the team here. Really attracted to the product and what it does for people like us, our operations leaders, right? It frees us up to go do some really innovative, fun stuff. And so I love the product, and it helps other departments, obviously, than just ops. But yeah, I met the team here at Workato, the executive team. The VJ is fantastic, the founder CEO, as well as the entire exec team, and really fell in love with the people first, and fell in love with the product, and then saw the opportunity ahead and felt like this would be a good place to go leverage what I learned and build at Qualtrics, and stumbled along the way. Maybe, knowing what I know now, could set it up right from the start and get things going a bit earlier, maybe, that I could see around the corner with. It's gonna, what's gonna happen at $1 billion in revenue, right? And so it's gonna happen at 2,000 sales reps, and bring that philosophy down, when there's 150 sales reps, right? And so you're just setting things up from the start rather than seeing them break later on. And so that all of that stuff really attracted me here.
Well, and I hope before you get to that 2,000 sales reps and beyond, that you have that deal conflict software that you want to.
Please, I'm looking for that one. I'll be a buyer if anyone wants to develop it.
Cody, I'm interested in a little bit of like introspective thoughts from you. And specifically what I mean by that is, I think your earliest RevOps role was in healthcare. And in an intern position, and later on, you've taken also different kinds of RevOps roles in kind of that extended healthcare space, eventually into kind of like smart home electronics. There's a manufacturing bent to it. And then, of course, we've been talking about Qualtrics and Workato in the last 30 minutes or so. If you were to look back on that day one of being in RevOps, and maybe specifically in SaaS RevOps, what kind of advice would you give to yourself, given where you are today?
Great question. I would give myself the advice to nail it and scale it. Like, you're going to start in some function of RevOps. It could be deal desk. It could be marketing ops, analytics. It could be, partner enablement. It doesn't really matter, right? You're going to start somewhere. Just nail your core job and be world-class at it, and then scale yourself. So as soon as you can give kind of what you've been doing and be able to hire someone and train them up to be able to do it, so you can go focus on other things, or if opportunities come your way I would always just say scale yourself, continue to do it. Like say yes to every opportunity, even if you don't feel prepared. None of us feel prepared. You're just going to figure it out as you go. So have confidence in yourself that you're going to be able to figure that out. And so nail it and scale it is kind of my mantra with RevOps in general, if you want to kind of progress. And then also just, I would say be close to sales and revenue and understand how it works. Understand how deals are coming in and, ride shotgun with salespeople and go to marketing events and see like what's happening at them that's actually converting. Be curious. So another one, advice would be to be curious. Just try and figure it out. And I think that bodes well for anyone. If you're at the right company, you got to be at the right company that's growing fast, and you really do an excellent job at your core job and it gets noticed, you're going to have more thrown on your plate. You're going to be able to progress and then, good things happen.
So I know you're going to be nailing your core job in the roles you're in today. And I know you've been at Workato for coming up close to a half year. There's going to be lots more to learn and lots more to be curious about. If we were to zoom out and think a bit more broadly about kind of your career trajectory and your bucket list items, what might be next in an ideal world for you, Cody? Or maybe what might be last, whichever way you want to answer it. Yeah. Yeah.
Great question. I think right now, you said I've only been here 4 months. So I've got a long runway here at Workato that I'm excited about. And we're still private. So you're taking the company public and then operating as a public company will be really exciting in my current role here and on the executive team. I think that, zooming out what comes next after that, at some point, whether at Workato or not, I'd love to be the president or CEO of a company and SaaS company, take them public, do all of that fun stuff and lead an entire group. But, when that happens and where it happens, I've got a lot of runway here at Workato, but that would be probably the next step.
Yeah, that sounds like a very, very exciting challenge. My last question here about really you as a person, Cody, is around what you do outside of work. Obviously, work is a big part of our lives. We spend probably more than a third of it in front of the screen with our teams. But what do you do to unwind? What are the things outside that makes you, especially given where you are, where you live, that makes you feel like, wow, life is so beautiful. This is a wonderful way to put things in context here at work. Yeah.
My family, number one, life's beautiful. I've got a wife and three kids that are great and healthy. So it's wonderful. We like to go explore Utah. Utah's a playground for people that like outdoors. So we've got one of those Airstream travel trailers. They're like one of those chrome Twinkies that's, driving on the road there. And it's that we go up into the mountains. We boondock. So we don't really go to campsites or RV parks. We go just in the middle of the mountain somewhere, bring a generator and we just go explore the outdoors. So we do that for fun. I love to hike, I love to fish, love to hunt. So we do that as a family, which is great. And then I love to explore the mountains in the winter and snowboard. My wife skis, the kids are skiing, they're young, but we're getting them going already early. You like to unwind by just kind of disconnecting fully, getting into the middle of a mountain where you have no cell service, exploring the national parks. If you haven't been to Moab, go to Moab. Go to Zion National Park is amazing. It's a wonderful spot. It's kind of a playground for us. So that's what we love to do for fun.
Sounds like you're in a perfect part of the world for all of those activities. I'm really happy for you and your family.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. We love it out here.
So Cody, where can people find you? Are you out on social media? If somebody wanted to follow you or reach out to you, how might they do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. So you can find me on LinkedIn, connect with me, and send me messages. But sometimes we, as we all know, we get overloaded as a RevOps leader with messages and stuff that's coming into us. And sometimes I don't see it as well. So if you want to email me, my email address is just my first and last name at gmail.com or cody@workato.com. Either of those work. And, would love to connect with other RevOps leaders or aspiring RevOps people out there that want to learn and grow. I think for me, I love to mentor and help where I can. I've been given a lot of mentorship in my days, and so would love to return the favor.
And how can one of our listeners learn more about Workato?
Yeah, go to the website, form, fill out something to learn, or just ask me. If you want to shoot me an email and ask and see where you want to apply it in your RevOps function or anywhere in your company. Happy to connect you with the right people, but also share my learnings and be a part of that journey with you too.
Well, it's so great that you're willing to be a resource, and I can only imagine there's probably a million and one uses for Workato within RevOps. So I'll be excited to continue to learn about those. I'm curious, what are some resources or communities that you turn to learn more and continue your journey in RevOps?
I think this podcast is fantastic. It's forums like this where you can learn from other people doing the same thing that really matters. I think one thing I've kind of done in my career that's maybe not as formal out there is just, take people to lunch. So I'll just find, I live out here in Utah. It's not a really good tech scene here. There's quite a few great tech companies, right? Whether, it's Divvy or Lucid or Qualtrics or others, Podium. And so for me, I'll just, ping somebody on LinkedIn or find a friend that works there and get their number and say, hey, you want to go to lunch? I'll take you to lunch. I've been doing that since I graduated. I was told by somebody named Scott Paul that the best investment you can make is just lunches and taking people that you aspire to be your mentor and go take them to lunch. So for me, it's a $20 investment, and I'm learning, thousands of dollars worth of value from these lunches. And so for me, that's where I go to learn. I think even when I go to conferences, when you ask about how I learned about the predictive scoring model, I was at an Anaplan conference 8 years ago, and there was somebody in RevOps at Tableau. And I remember just going out to lunch and talking and learned a lot about the random forest model. So that was like my key in there. So I think taking people to lunch, if I'm traveling, if I'm in the Bay Area and I'm going to go there for Workato, whether it's a Warriors game that we'll go to and have a suite at, or it's just I've got an hour for lunch and I can go find somebody out in the Bay that's a RevOps leader at a local company. I'll try and set up lunch. So I think that's the way to go for me. It's just getting to know people personally.
Wow, such great advice. And we're curious too, are there any other RevOps pros that you might think would be a good fit on the podcast? Any others out there that you're following, or you track the materials that they produce?
Yeah, I think two people come to mind. BJ Larson at ClickUp is a good friend, fantastic leader. Would be really interesting to have on the podcast. He played in the NFL for the Buffalo Bills and then got into RevOps after retirement, which is... All right,
that's got to be the most original RevOps origin story.
Yeah, for sure. And Yezi over at Pendo. Yezi's fantastic. I just met her here recently through Workato connections through our VCs. And I've been meeting with Yezi over at Pendo weekly and bi-weekly. Another thing that I would do is just ask around, who are people if you're a private company, who else, does your board member really admire in the space in their portfolio? And you'll start to see who those all-stars are. And, Yezi came to mind and was brought up. And so I just reached out and asked if we could meet. We met, and it's been fantastic to learn and grow from her. And so, we got a bi-weekly sync going for 30 minutes. And we get to talk about, hey, how's your annual turn going? What are you doing over there? And it's really innovative and we learn from each other. So I think back to your previous question, that's another tidbit there, but I think those two would be fantastic for the podcast.
So Cody, I want to thank you so much for being a guest today on the RevOps Rockstars podcast. I learned so much. I feel like you've shared about so many interesting topics, from territory management to deal conflicts to your love of the outdoors and how you unwind from the insanity of RevOps. It's really been a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you both, David, Jarin. It's been my pleasure. I appreciate it and had a great time.
And I also want to thank our audience for listening and soaking up all of Cody's gems. I got some very actionable takeaways here. Facing and calling up those disgruntled reps, have those conversations, stay close to the ground, taking people out to lunch. I'm excited to do more of that now with your prompting, Cody, and also with, thankfully, COVID more in the background. And also things like asking your board who they admire in terms of execs and RevOps and building your network that way. I think our audience are probably going to be able to take a lot of these actionable items and incorporate it into their network building exercises. So thank you. And thank you, Cody, again, for sharing such wonderful advice for our audience.
Thank you both.
And this has been another exciting episode of RevOps Rockstars. See you next time.
Stay classy, rock stars.
And that wraps up another episode. Thank you so much for joining us. For show notes and other episodes, visit RevOpsRockstars.com. RevOps Rockstars is sponsored by OpFocus. Visit opfocus.com to learn more about how OpFocus helps SaaS companies scale their revenue operations.